We're in the right place.
Yes. Good afternoon. Definitely. in the right.
Here we are. There you go.
Just this one.
How are you?
Good,
That's
how are
all you
you?
need.
Okay, great.
Just a contract. That's all we'll be doing. It
Good.
only takes us 3 hours.
I know. It's a lot of fine print.
Maybe only 2. It kind of depends. It's just kind of depends.
Also, I got those out. Pen. Thank you.
We'll start in 1 minute. Man, that Corona Ultra
That was from the Ignite class.
seltzer. Water.
They had somebody bring that in at the graduation for Ignite.
Might be a little early for Corona.
It's never too early.
Never too early. Okay, let's get started. So it's not completely new, but kind of new, really new. I mean, your number one job as a real estate agent, flat out, is listings. I mean, it's about creating opportunities for listings. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a bottom line, because we can go through the contract. Really, it's fairly simple. It's easy to get done because you're just basically filling in blanks. But to get to that point, you have to have a client. So you've got to have contact. And so the key thing to remember is that your job every day when you get up in the morning is to find, somebody to work with, whether it's a buyer or a seller, it doesn't matter. And a lot of times new agents think, I've got to have all these leads. I've got to have all these leads. I've got to have all these leads. How many leads you really need? One. If you had one good buyer lead and one good seller lead each week, that'd be 104 a year. And you can't handle that anyway. So, you just try to generate one. You're not trying to generate 50. I mean, I see people that, billboards and all this nonsense, and pay Zillow and pay realtor.com and pay all these people to get leads, and they're bad leads, and you work them. You really just want one good lead. You get one good lead, if you did one and you could end up in a transaction, then that's 52 transactions a year. And 52 transactions a year is around $10 million, right? $200,000 times 52. I think that's about right. That'd be good, right? That'd be 3,000 plus in income.
I mean, I would, one closing a month would be great.
Yeah. Well, 12 is really, as a new agent, you really ought to think about and be honest with yourself. If I could close 12 to 20 in my first 12 months, then that would be fantastic. Get up here closer. Don't sit way back there. It's in the Baptist church. Come up here. Right there. How's that? You're not in the front, but you're not in the back. But if you could close 12 to 20 in your first full 12 months, then that's fine. You've done a pretty good job, really. If you close more than that, you're probably gonna be a little bit overwhelmed, but 12 to 20, you can handle that. And think about 20 again. That's 4 million in production. That's over $100,000 in gross income. You get your split and all that. It's still pretty good money. It's more than most attorneys make in Springfield. So I'd take that in a minute. And from there, what you do once you've accomplished that, now you can go to your own level, wherever you want it to be. Do you want to be a superstar, or you just want to make a great living in Springfield, Missouri? So, but just remember, your job is to generate opportunities. That's what you've got to do every morning when you get up. It's not about, it is about training for sure, and you need to get as much of that as you can. But just think about generating opportunities. How can I generate opportunities? Well, open houses are great for new or old agents. Door knocking is good in pairs, I would think, especially around new listings and things like that. Name tags. I wear a Keller Williams shirt everywhere I go, and people ask me about real estate all the time. I'm happy to talk about it. And the answer is always, how's it market? Great. It's great. I mean, it is. Compared to working in a cubicle all day, or being a greeter at Walmart or McDonald's, or a waitress, even though you make a lot of money as a waitress or waiter or wait staff, whatever it is. A lot of stress, a lot of pain, you know. a
Or
lot of-
shipping at Amazon,
Huh?
being shipping at Amazon.
Yeah, that'll be a tough job too. So the point is,
Night shift.
is that, this is a great job. I mean, it's gonna be 100 or something like that. I'd rather be in my vehicle driving to a listing any day than I would be inside in a hole with somebody else telling me what to do. Because you get to do this, is you're an independent contractor, so you're your own boss, don't forget that. So really important though, your job is to generate opportunities and you can turn them into buyers or sellers, it doesn't matter. The contract, honest to God, is easy. What you have to learn to do is just paraphrase for your clients, so you have a better knowledge of it than they do, certainly. And most of my clients, even when I go through the contract with them, I still go through it pretty much paragraph by paragraph. And I've been in it a long time. I don't go through line by line, but I go through paragraph, section by section, and kind of let them know generally, this is what this says. And then now, here's a copy, not only electronic, I give them a physical copy to read. If you're younger, you probably won't do that, but not everybody's your age. And they don't just sit on their computer reading documents all the time. Some of us like to do this. What did it say? Like that. Not like that. I can't do that. All right, so we're going to start just talking about the contract in general. Get it. This is a sell contract. So basically, we kind of look at it from the standpoint of you're a buyer's agent and you're working with a buyer. So this is an example of a real contract up there on the board. You can't see it if you sit way back there. You can't see it from sitting, oh, you probably can from right there. But it's a real live contract that we're in the process of right now, my client of mine. You see up here at the top on this one, if you can't see it, but who is the buyer? And that's the first thing it asks. Well, first it says, hey, the contract has legal consequences. If you don't understand it, seek an attorney. But then it says, who's the buyer? And you'll notice here, this agent has written it out correctly. It says Donald J. and Carrie J. Babb. We can assume that Donald and Carrie are married, but if we didn't want to make that assumption, we can write initials in there. We say A, M, P, or MP, married people. You don't have to do that, but you could.
So like today, I'm getting ready to write a contract for a buyer and it's two separate, they're not married.
Okay.
So I would just give two separate, they're both names.
Right. John Smith and Debbie Jones, or Debbie Smith and Debbie Jones, whoever. Doesn't matter, but yeah, you just separate them out. And the title company may ask you, are they married, even though their last names are different, because that's,
Common now.
yeah.
For married people.
What is it?
For married people not to have the same last name. A lot of women are not doing that.
Yeah, anymore. Yeah, they don't do that. All right, so we can have that, but the other thing to remember is that the buyer's name can be a trust. It can be an estate. It could be an LLC. It could be an S corp. It could that could be that name across there. I have a corporation or corporation. Kelby Lane Inc. is the name of my corporation. So Kelby Lane Inc. could be the buyer up here, which is great. Doesn't matter. As long as you, as the buyer's agent, know who is allowed to sign. So it has to be a real person sign the contract. It can be anybody's name up there. But when we get down to signature, you can't sign Kelby Lane Inc. You have to sign James L. Bolin and then for Kelby Lane Inc. or by Kelby Lane Inc. on that last page. Okay? Can it be an individual? Yeah. 1 to buy, 2 to sell in Missouri if they're married. I mean, you got to have one person. Like I can buy a house and my wife wouldn't know about it. And she'd bought houses without me before. And I don't know about it. But when we sell it, the state of Missouri is going to make both of us sign, most likely. Because everybody in Missouri, if you're married, has marital rights to that property. And so they're 50-50, unless it's deemed otherwise in writing. Okay? Any questions on that?
I'm good.
Good, all right. And then the property, it used to have the seller's name on here, and then the attorneys decided we don't need the seller, we're just selling property anyway, so we have the property. And this is actually downtown in one of those towers, 350 South John Q. Hammonds Parkway, 3D. Because the entire building holds one address, but it's apartment 3D. Okay? Good with that? All right. Springfield, zip code, and then the county is green. Now up here it says, if it's located in a municipality, if it's incorporated, put the name there. It's better to just put the name if it's a city, no matter what it is, even though it's probably not a municipality. That's like Crestwood and Chesterfield and things like that in St. Louis or municipalities. We don't have those around here actually. Okay, but we still, most people put the name in there. Next section has to do with the legal description. If you're doing a small acreage or a farm, typically if you've got the legal description or a survey, you want to attach it. You want to have both parties, if you initial that or check that box, and you want to have both parties initial that and date it. If you have a legal description or a survey. In this case, it's one big tall building and we know it's this unit, so we don't attach one. We do attach, I try to attach the tax records if I've got them and have everybody initial, but you don't have to have that because the deed is typically going to govern. But if it is something that your client has prepared for you and it's in the documents, a survey or the complete legal description, I would still include it. I would check that box. But again, all parties have to initial. If that box is checked, all parties have to initial. Oh, shut up. She's got me working on 2 computers here. She thinks I'm as smart as her.
I don't know what you did, but you messed something up. You hear that echo? Jim Bolin, Jim Bolin.
I gotta switch the speaker over here.
Did you text Shannon?
This is a commercial break. Hey, I'm getting reverb down here.
So if you could send
Thanks, man. We're gonna. All right, we're up to inclusions and exclusions in the contract. And the interesting thing about this is so many agents, new and old, don't read this section and don't understand it. I mean, it's pretty clear. Property includes, but it's not limited to, is what the contract says, all the following, which are now located on the real estate, all of which seller warrants to convey to buyer free and clear at closing. So right here in the middle, it's got solar panels. See those? They're obviously going to be included if they're on the house, right? But most times they're not paid for. You know, there's a note on those. And that's a real problem. So you have to be concerned about that. You should be concerned anytime you see solar panels as a buyer's agent, even though, you know, I understand what their function is, they're most likely not completely paid for. And so if a house is priced at 225 and you think that's a fair price, and it's got $45,000 worth of solar panels on there, it could be an issue because they're probably not paid for. And the question is from the seller is, you know, are they going to be paid for at closing? And the answer is whatever the seller says. I'm reverbing here. I was trying to scroll up and it did something else. We'll fix it, right?
I'll do my best.
Well, and I've got that screen over there, but but it doesn't matter.
You're good.
All right, so this contract. In the sale, here's where the problem comes in, is you're looking at all these pictures and they're all pretty and all that. And here's a storage building in the backyard, and here's this $4,000 French refrigerator, you know, everything. It ain't included. It's not there. I don't care if they say refrigerator is included in the marketing remarks. If they say it in the agent remarks on the property, if it's not in the contract, it doesn't stay with the property. So if you want the refrigerator, what's the first thing you do?
Write the refrigerator in.
You go down to that line right there and it says refrigerator to be included. Now, my specific suggestion to you is if there's a refrigerator in the house, you say the stainless steel refrigerator in the kitchen to remain with the home at no value. So you don't get the refrigerator in the garage, right?
Right.
So the stainless steel refrigerator in the kitchen to remain with the property at no value. Or all appliances currently in the home to remain with the property at no value. The problem with all appliances is, and I've had this question come up, that include the Keurig coffee maker and the mixer. And, you know, you'd think people would be smarter than that, but sometimes you get feedback from somebody who's detail oriented. All right, so if we go through this list and we look at it, it kind of makes sense. Garage door openers and controls, keys and remote entry controls, and so on. Attic and ceiling fans. You wouldn't think anybody would take a ceiling fan out of a house that's attached, but they have, and they do. Lighting fixtures, attached antennas, flush mounted speakers. This has become a problem. You see those speakers up there? I consider that white speaker to be flush mounted. This definitely is. He's right up here. So they can't take them. So if you go to a house, you're about to close, you do a walkthrough, there's holes in the ceiling, you need to immediately call the agent and say, hey, we've got a problem. Click, here's a picture. They took the speakers and they're flush mounted. We'd either like them to be returned and attached in working order, or we'd like compensation. Okay? You do that before closing, call the agent first, make sure you have pictures on all of that. Over here, we got the solar panels, and again, be careful. Recently, one of the agents in our company listed a house for 165 and priced fairly, I thought. And then they had $33,000 that was still owed on the solar panels. So you take your 165 buyer there, who's qualified up to 175 maybe, and then they've got to assume the loan or pay off the solar panels for $33,000. They can't do it because their debt to income ratio goes bad. Right now, they're pretty good shape. You know, the debt to income is pretty good. And then you add $33,000 to it. Now they can't buy the property. So solar panels are going to cause us headaches for a long time. The other thing that's funny is when we had the appraisal panel up here, they're not allowed to add any value for solar panels, regardless of how big they are, what they do, how much they reduce the electric bill. Appraisers are not allowed to add value for them. So if your client goes, look, I've got all these solar panels and my bill's only $50 a month and I only paid $65,000 for these. Let me say, recoup my value after I die. Just kidding. All right, so solar panels and problems. Propane tanks will always get you in trouble. So if you drive up to the house to show the house, or if you read your detail sheet and it says propane tank, you need to ask whether it's owned or leased. If it's owned, I would still write it in here. Even if it's in the detail sheet, I'd write that it's included. The reason being is we've had sellers that actually take the propane tank because it does belong to them. My argument is, yeah, but you can't, the gas furnace can't function without the propane. So you can't do that. But I think they argue the other way because it is personal property. So to be sure, you write it in the contract as included. Okay? Security systems are becoming an issue too, because we've got the Simply Safes and rings and all these things that are different type of semi-security systems. You need to, if you want them, if you want a Ring doorbell, or if you want the Simply Safe system, you put it in included. Hardwired, there wasn't any question, right? You got an ADT on the wall there, it stays with the house. I guess I read this one on fireplace equipment and doors, and it says, if attached, include the artificial logs. You don't think anybody would take those, but they might, you know. On kitchen cooking, notice that we got dishwashers, trash compactors, garbage disposals, microwave ovens that are built in. There's a lot of difference between a built-in and one that's just slid on the cabinet. And then oven ranges, stoves, and attachments. And we've had this lately where people are starting to take their ranges with them. So you go to a walkthrough and the range is gone. You shoot a picture of the hole, you call the other agent, we've got a problem. The range is gone. It appears to me to be a GE 6 burner. I just looked them up on Home Depot and they're $1,750. We either want compensation or we want the range brought back. And you do that before closing. And then down here on curtain drapery, hardware, usually blinds stay, but if you want to take those purple curtains that you handmade, then you take them with you, but you've got to leave the hardware so that somebody else can go back in and hang it up. And then attached mirrors. Touch anything. And all mirrors in the bathroom. So HGTV started sticking these mirrors up against the wall. The big mirrors are real pretty. If it's in there when you show the house, then it needs to be in there when you close. Even if it's not attached to the wall. You know what I'm talking about? Have you seen those? They set them behind the sink. All right, so we've got included on this contract washer, dryer, and large entertainment center with TV in the living area. Again, if you're doing a government loan, especially, you should put at no value at the end of that because the lenders don't like to loan on personal property. This is a cash purchase, so it doesn't matter. Now, so what else could be included that we haven't even talked about? Because this is just a condo.
Furniture?
Yeah, you could have furniture. They got the entertainment center is a good example in there. But you could have all furniture in the home at no value. But you could also have the play set in the backyard, right? It's personal property. I mean, if it's back there, you know, it might look fancy and all that. But if somebody can load it up on a truck, they can take it with them. So if your kids want it or your buyer's kids want it or whatever, you put it in the contract, right? So how about the storage building? I mentioned it before. I mean, people think the storage buildings stay with their property, but if they're just sitting on the ground or on skids, they don't stay with their property. They don't have to. They're personal property. So if you wanted that storage building that's back there, you would write it up in the contract. You would include it in the deal, okay?
Hot tubs can be moved.
Huh?
Hot tubs can be moved. They can be
The
added.
hot tubs is in there, I think, somewhere too. Maybe not. But yeah, hot tubs, if you want it, we're good. How about excluded? What don't you want? Well, the play set in the backyard. Grandma and grandpa are moving in there. They don't want a damn play set, you know? They want to grow a big garden, whatever. How about the storage building? Maybe you don't want it, right? You exclude it and you put in there to be removed prior to closing. But anything you don't want should be excluded. How about the garden gnomes? you guys. I've said this before, but I taught English for 10 years. When I first started student teaching, I was teaching senior English, and I taught Chaucer after lunch one semester to sophomores in high school, sophomores and juniors and seniors, small school. It was awful. You know who Chaucer is, Canterbury Tales, Wife of Bath, all that, yeah. Middle English type stuff. But it was awful because the kids would go to lunch and then they'd come back. It's like no air conditioning, back as old as I am when I started. And I'd start talking to them and they'd have these looks on their faces like, I'm not seeing that yet, but I'm just saying. It is after lunch. We should always have this class in the morning. All right, so propane tanks, water softeners, solar panels, I don't want any of that. I don't want the gnomes. I don't want the lion figureheads in the front yard. Anything else you could put in there as an exclusion? All right, the purchase price is $230. Seller concessions are $0. What are concessions? They're typically applied to the purchase price to offset the cost associated with a loan. That's typically where they are. So, and I get agents sometimes who complain, or not agents, but clients who complain when a first-time home buyer needs help purchasing a home. And I think it's really sad because you know how hard it is to save money right now. I mean, it's tough, you know. You got 2 kids and you're both working, husband and wife, and you've got 2 cars because you both have to work, and then you've got childcare, and then you've got insurance, and you've got food and things like that, and rent and whatever. If you can save any money, you're in good shape. So when somebody asks for 3% or 2.5% of the purchase price here, 3% would be about $6,900, taking around $7,000 in concessions. It's not because, you know, they're trying to rip off the seller. They really need the help. That's the only way they can get in. Now, if the seller doesn't like that concession amount, and this is the list price of the property, they could counter at a higher price, but still include the concessions, which would allow the person to still buy the house. My point to you is this: don't beat up somebody because they ask for concessions. They may really need the
So
concession.
I work with a lot of people that do need the concessions. So how do you make a strong contract for a buyer's? How do you make that look strong?
You would write it, if the list price is $230, you would write it for $233,500, and then ask for $7,000 in concessions. Then he's only paying $3,500 less than what his net is only gonna be $3,500 less, where it would have been $7,000 less. That's the best way to do it.
Okay.
A lot of times you can discuss it with the agent too, but before you do it, but that's the best way. And don't be surprised if sometimes you get a counter back and they want to be 237. The problem with that is you may go over the appraised value. And you don't want to do that either because that's more negotiating down the road. But I think that's the best way to do it. And if I'm presenting the contract, I always tell them, when I list the property, I say, you know, if we get a government loan on this property, whether it's FHA or VA or USDA around the country, they're going to ask for concessions. It's almost 100% chance. And my buyer or sellers typically say, what the hell is that? What's a concession? I try to explain it to them. And I try to explain the first time home buyer deal, you know, that they need this money. They've been able to save X, you know, if it's an FHA, 3.5%, they've been able to save that. Plus have some money to get into the house too and all that for moving. So, you know, they can't buy the house without some kind of concessions from the seller. Nobody helped me. Yeah, you know, tough life. We're trying to help people now. First time home buyers need all the help they can get. They did put down earnest money. It's going to be deposited at Hogan Land and Title no later than 7 days. Now, if you'll look at that 7 one there, it says 5 days unless otherwise noted. This is really important if you're representing your buyer and they decide to put down earnest money, that money's got to be deposited within that time frame. If you read the rest of the paragraph, it says, if it's not deposited within that time frame, then the seller can terminate the contract without penalty. If it's not deposited within that time frame, the seller can terminate the contract without penalty. The other thing is, if it's not deposited within that time frame, it could be considered at the beginning of a default, right? The buyer's defaulting. He's not following the terms and conditions of the contract. So really important. So especially now, because Hogan, Great American, probably Meridian, I know every one of them will do electronic deposits. You know, they'll do basically wire transfers on earnest money. But if your client does do this, if they do deposit it, you should receive from the title company a copy of the receipt, and that becomes a part of your file. What happens to the earnest money is subtracted from the purchase price, the total purchase price when we close. So it's not like it's just sitting out there and it doesn't get applied to anything. It just says, I'm in earnest. I really want to buy this property. I'm willing to put down this much money, even though it's going to take 30 days to close or 45 or whatever. On 29 there, it starts talking about additional earnest money. That's typically new construction is where that is. You know, you want some additional things and the buyer or the builder wants that. Don't worry about it now. If you run into that, it's a pretty simple question you can call me on. Number 4 on closing. Understand this, even though some of you have already closed some stuff, subject to the terms of the contract, the sale will be closed. What does that mean? The unconditional release and exchange of the deed for the purchase price, together with all the other documents and funds required by this contract, the closing. So you're going to go and have documents signed at some point in your career, and the money's not going to be there. You've not closed until the money gets there. So you don't give the keys away. Nobody gets possession on the house or anything like that until the funds have been transferred to all parties. So sellers got their funds, agents have got their funds. We're okay. Agents the last to get paid. No offense, sorry, but the seller certainly wants theirs if they have any equity in their home. So where are we going to do that at? You need to specify Angel, Hogan Land and Title. That's Angel is the name of one of the closers. She'll be the closing agent at. You don't have to put 1605, but you do have to put Sunshine, Springfield, Missouri, and then on the date, October 20th, 2023. And the question is, how do you determine when you're going to close? Today is July 25th. So if we just said 30 days is from now is August 25th, you ask your clients, when would you like to close? And the clients, most of them say this, as soon as possible. But they don't realize that they also are getting a loan. And so that is really determined by the lender. It's not determined by the buyer. Cash buyer, you can move it as quick as you can. You can get a 7-day closing anywhere in town on the cash buyer. The problem is the sellers may not be ready to move. The problem is the title company may not move that fast, depending on who you use. But in most cases, the first thing you do is you ask the lender, you know, when can we close? So buyer comes to you, you get into a meeting with them, you sit down and have a consultation, you're trying to get them to agree to a buyer's agency contract and employment agreement. And you get all that done and you say, okay, we're going to see property tomorrow. If we go under contract, you know, how soon can you close? Because most buyers are living somewhere else. So they may be in a lease, and that could be concerning, couldn't it? Especially if it's a multiple month lease or an annual lease. They'd have to find a way to get out. If they're in month to month, they're still going to have a 30-day waiting period after they give notice. So the lender says 45 days, you take them out, show them a couple houses, and you've done your job, and they really know what they want. You write the offer. My suggestion is it's probably going to be 30 to 45 days. It'll never be less than that unless it's a cash offer. If they're getting a loan, it's probably going to be 30 to 45 days. You got inspections to go through. You've got an appraisal to go through. Then after the appraisal, everything goes to the underwriter at the lender's place, and then you finally can close. So you've got some work to do before you get closed and get paid. That's the reason you want to work really hard and generate lots of opportunities. Because you close, while you're waiting for this one to close, you want to put another one under contract, right? So you have one in July, one in August, one in September. And then at some point you start doing 2 in July and 2 in August and 2 in September, right? So that's why you don't quit. This is again, back to that first saying about generating leads. Most bad realtors are guilty of this. They get an opportunity and they work their little booty off and they get it under contract. But then they don't do any more lead generation or trying to find another person until they close that one. They're at the bottom, right? My hands probably know this. That's not a good example of it. Lead generate, I get a lead, I go under contract, I work really hard, I get it closed, I get paid. I'm out of a job again, right? So I work really hard, I get new leads, I go under contract, I get paid, close. I'm out of a job again. So the idea is to make it more look like this. So stay out of the hurricane and go out into the bay somewhere and work where you have lots of opportunities. You create opportunities. The other nice thing about that, I was in Branson when I first started, and we had to have 10 contracts on the board to close 5 deals because the Marcus was so stupid down
That's
there.
what I was gonna ask about what percentage actually closed.
97. Yeah, we don't miss them up here. Springfield, these GSBR in Springfield has a lot of great agents, and great agents don't screw that up. Branson at the time, it was back in the late 90s. There was so much service industry that the lenders were out there fighting for every dollar they could get. So they'd give you people or provide you, oh yeah, it's a slam dunk. It's a slam dunk. And half of it wouldn't close because these people, their debt to income was too high. And they were making, $100 a week paycheck and $500 a week in tips or something. It just wouldn't close. It was just difficult. So we always, Kristen and myself, my wife, our goal was to have 10 transactions on the board because we kind of felt like 50% of them were going to fail, no matter how hard we worked. It's either going to fail on our side or their side. Springfield's not like that. It's not like it. And this market area is not like that now. This is where you want to be. Work hard, get a lead, now go get another lead. And you just, maybe you have a couple days in between, but you don't have months. This is January, February, March. Well, you don't want to go that long, it's just too much. You want to make sure that you're constantly working towards that next opportunity, okay? So we've got our closing scheduled, and then it goes on to say that possession and all keys will be delivered to buyer at closing, but it's not the broker's job. Hell, I'll tell you, most brokers deliver the keys and the garage door openers at closing if they're representing the seller. They just do. You don't have to. But look what they've added. Buyers should change locks following possession and reset the factory setting all codes and passwords for electronic systems. This is something we never had to worry about. But now we do, because a lot of people have the push button locks on their doors. They have push button codes on their garages. They have Ring or something on their doorbells. So all that needs to be reset. So who would deal with that? Buyer's agent or seller's agent? The buyer's agent probably would at least ask the question, right? Could I have the code for the garage door, electronic door entry, and your password for the security system that you're leaving? So because then if you have the password, you can go in and change it. Right, down at the bottom there, it talks about on 42, attach a right or possession to be transferred other than at closing. We really like for it to all happen on the same day. We're going to close, you get possession, you move out. But if your buyer says, I'd really like to have early possession, that's a bad idea. If the seller says, I want to have, keep possession for an extra week, that's a bad idea. I mean, I just wouldn't encourage it. Too many bad things can happen if the buyer gets in the house early or for example, buyer gets in the house a week early and then it doesn't close. Now you've basically got a tenant or a squatter, or the seller stays in the house after closing and then the seller doesn't move out in a timely manner. I mean, it's all of it's bad. The one I do like, but if you do that, and it's not to say that you never will, if you do, you've got to use a rider. Possession by buyer prior to closing, possession by seller after closing. Now, the one I do like is this one, limited purpose entry by buyer prior to closing. If I'm selling and my buyer's agent on a vacant house and my client lives close enough, I'm going to ask if they can have limited possession prior to closing so that they can move small items into the house, boxes and things like that. So 3-car garage, can I have this one garage? We'll have no access to house, we won't move any furniture, won't do anything like that. But this would really help my client because then the movers will come on moving day, they'll move all the big stuff and all our little stuff will already be moved. I really like that one.
Yeah, my husband had to have the TVs delivered like 2 days before from Best Buy on our place in Hollister.
Yeah, so limited possession prior to closing. Farms, if you sell any farm property, I think we talked about some of those today. They always need limited purpose entry by prior to closing, because if you've ever lived on a farm, you got more than one trailer, you got more than one vehicle, you've got more than one tractor. If you have animals, you can't move them all typically in one load. You can't put cows, horses, and pigs in the same trailer. So you might need access to the property beforehand. And if you do, this is what you use. I used it twice last year on farm moves. Worked like a charm. The other farmer understood. He gave them a pasture for their cows and everything. All right. If it's rental property, whole different ball game. We don't have to get into that because it would take a long time to understand. So, but if you do sell a rental property, then you can just call me. It takes about 5 minutes. We can sit down together and we'll explain it. All right, on the next page, we go into the sale appraisal, financing contingencies. I suggest that you make sure you never make a mistake on this. At the top, the contract is not contingent upon the sale or closing of any other existing property. It's not. In this contract that I have, it's not. That's good news. Or this contract is contingent on the sale or closing of an existing property of buyer. If it's checked, then you must include one of two riders. One is a contingency for sale, which means I have a house that I want to sell, I'm the buyer, and it is on the market or it's not on the market, but it's not under contract. The other rider is a contingency for closing of buyer's existing property. That's the one where I have a house to sell, but it's under contract. I think that's a strong offer myself in our area, in our market area. It's especially good if they've already gone through the inspection period. If they've gotten through inspections and there's still not a problem, that's a great sale. And that's a strong contract. And I would look at that really hard if I was a listing agent. But if you check that box, then you must include a rider or the contract could be deemed invalid. I'm 55. I mean, I almost always have my buyers check the appraisal contingency, whether we're buying a investment property real cheap or a higher end house. Because I just simply, myself personally, I don't believe that you should pay more than it appraises for. That's just my opinion. Now you can see in their case, they don't want an appraisal. They could care less since they're paying cash. But most lenders are going to require what? An appraisal. So I want to make sure we have those. Here's the key to that. Go down to line 63. In that blank on 63, you would want to put the term of the contract. So if it's 45 days, you really want to put 40 to 45 days in that line right there. The reason being is the appraisers don't just want it out there the first week and make an appraisal. Is typically at least 3/4 of the way into the contract before they go out and do the appraisal. And then after they do the appraisal, it may take them 3 to 7 days to get the appraisal results back. So you're 30 days into the contract and all of a sudden it doesn't appraise. You have no grounds as a buyers to terminate the contract. But if it does come under appraised value and you're still within the timelines on line 63, you can write an appraisal notice to the seller saying the appraised value of the property was $215 and our contract price is $230. Seller to reduce the price to $215. Okay? Right? You don't want to overpay for something, do you? No. All right. Everybody ready? So if you get an appraisal and the appraisal comes in under 1, the seller can reduce the price to match the appraised value. 2, the buyer can come up, pay the extra, right? Okay. 3, they can negotiate and come to some middle ground. 4, the buyer can terminate the contract without penalty as long as a notice is delivered within the timeline. That's why that timeline is so important. Okay, so on line 63, we gave them notice that it appraised at $215, the contract was $230. Now on line 66, the seller has 5 days to tell me what they're gonna do. They typically respond pretty quickly and go, oh, you know, I'm not doing that, or I'm doing this. It doesn't mean it stops right there. It just means that that's what their first answer is. You still try to negotiate. And for a while, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've had houses that are appraised for 50,000 less and 20,000 less and 10 and 5 and 2 and 1. Point is, it could be a significant number. And a lot of times the buyers don't want to buy it. When the market was in a frenzy, even if it came under appraisal, sometimes the buyer says, I'll just pay the extra, you know, because they've been struggling to get a house.
I didn't know how to do the math, but I bought a house once. It was a VA foreclosure and I wanted it. And the agent at that time said, well, bid the bid. And I said, and he said, look, other people are bidding if you want it, because nobody's gonna bid the bid if you want it. Then he did the math on like, if instead of a 30-year loan, a 15, what it meant, like, or maybe a 30 to a 30. That $5,000 difference made to the monthly payment. And it was like $30. So I quit arguing over the 5,000.
Right, and that's a buyer's agent technique that's used, a script that says, you know, reduce it to a minimum.
Right.
So your $5,000 difference, you make an offer on a property, the seller makes an offer that's $5,000 higher than what you want, but you still really want the house. So you reduce it to a minimum,
Yeah.
and you say to your buyer, do you go to Starbucks? Oh yeah, 4 or 5 times a week. That's $35, isn't it? A week, approximately. You tip occasionally, so it's $35 a week. Well, this $5,000, if you put it at 6%, is $30 a month, right? Quit going to Starbucks. Let's buy this house.
Right, and then he showed me like, get the 30-year loan so you're not boxed into a higher payment. And then just put $186 more a month and you can pay it off in 15 and look how much more you're gonna save. So I wanna know how to do that math, because that was a good conversation.
You're talking to the wrong guy when it comes to I mean, that's a lender conversation. So we
Okay.
have lenders in here every team meeting, but whatever lender you want to deal with or you decide to deal with, they can give you that. And they've probably got, well, I know, I don't say probably, they've got programs that can say $200,000 house, 30-year loan at X%, and you make payments of $100 more per month, it'll be reduced like that. And it's always good. I always encourage my clients when we close, you know, and the lender's sitting there typically is, you know, if you do pay a little bit a month ahead, you're gonna really, you know, cut a lot off your end loan. And they can. You can get it down to 15 years by doing that.
And he did the math real quick with a calculator in front of me
Who?
about the
The
monthly
agent?
payment, the agent who contracted.
Well, hell, he's smarter than I am.
I know he's smarter than me too, and he,
There's an
you know,
app.
and it was true. Huh?
There's an app called Carl's Mortgage,
Okay,
and you can go in there. and
Say it again.
Carl's Mortgage,
Carl's Mortgage, there you go. Everybody
and you
write
can
that
put
down.
in, it'll give you table, like, it's really cool. I learned that in Ignite, a lot of people.
Carl's Mortgage. Got it?
because
Okay.
with the interest, I'm from the 80s. So I'm like, you know, this people haggling over, it's like 7% now. I mean, my business loan in 80 was like 21%, so.
We bought our first restaurant.
So it's like, you know, I know it's a big adjustment coming from 3 or 4, but
Here's the problem. This is where you have difficulty understanding it, but the $200,000 house at 3%, the base payment was $600. That's a base, that's principal and interest, not counting taxes and insurance. The $200,000 house today at 7% is $1,400. That's 2.5 times what it was last year, 18 months ago.
is that much? Wow.
Yeah, so now you gotta have another job to buy the same house. That's why the first-time home buyers are cut completely out of it.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's just kind of a mess. We've never been in this situation before. Back when the interest rates were that, since you said that, I bought my first house at, it was 9 3/4, I think it was at the
Exactly.
time. But it was 49,000. That same house today is 250,000.
Okay, got it.
So 250 times 9%, the wages haven't gone, I mean, they've gone up, but they haven't gone
Okay.
like that.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, so it makes it a lot harder, yeah. I mean, people are stressed out and they should be. What we're losing is an entire generation of first-time home buyers, in my opinion. All right, back to the contract on financing contingency. Number 1, it's not contingent upon financing. So you can see that's the box they checked, I'm pretty sure. Now, although not a condition of performance, a buyer may finance any portion, but it's not going to affect the purchase. So if I go out and buy a house that I want to remodel, I might check this box, but I still might borrow $20,000 or $30,000 because I want to use the $20,000, $30,000 in cash to pay the contractors to get the remodel done. Okay, so that's as good as cash. Number 2 is non-conventional. If that box is checked, you've got to have a rider for a government loan. If you check the box on line 70, I can't see it, 4, 5, non-conventional, then you've got to have that rider, which is government loan. We're probably not going to have seller financing, and we're probably not going to have loan assumptions right now. Haven't seen very many of them, haven't seen any of them, in fact. So you're going to have a government loan, and it applies to HUD, USDA, FHA, VA, any 100% financing program that's here in town. And then conventional is typically 95% or less is your loan, a conventional loan. So if I put down 5%, I'm typically getting a conventional loan. Now, if you look at line 80, that's kind of like line 63, because that's a loan contingency deadline. You need to put in there the term of the contract. So if you got a 45-day close, you probably want to put 40 at least in there. Because if I go that 40 to 45 days, if I go today 38 and the lender comes back and says, hey, I hate to tell you this, but the buyer can't buy. You know, the status has changed. The underwriter's not approving their tips or their bonuses that they receive, which is pretty common. So he's not going to be able to buy this house. Well, if I don't have 40 days in there, then he's still obligated to buy the property. That's what it says on line 95. So if I don't put 40 to 45 days in there and I get a loan notice from the lender that says he can't buy and I'm not within that time frame, Then on line 95, it says if the loan contingency deadline passes without a termination, the buyer remains obligated under this contract and must have available all funds required to close. Wouldn't that be sad? So protect your client is what I'm trying to tell you as a buyer's agent. And then if it does come in, so the loan contingency comes back and the lender says you can't buy, there's a notice that you provide to the listing agent that says, unfortunately, the loan's been denied and we won't be able to purchase. Contract is terminated without penalty to the buyer. Okay? So you're protecting your client. That's what that paragraph says. That's why I said that you have to paraphrase these things. Now, in line 87, everybody, including me and the MREC, which is the Missouri Real Estate Commission, wants you to put something in these blanks. You don't have to fill them all out, but you got to put something. If it's an FHA loan, we know it's 96.5%, right? If it's conventional, we know it's at least 95, but the first question I ask my buyer, if you're going to go conventional or you're doing a government loan, conventional, how much are you putting down? They say 10%. 100 minus 10 is 90. So I put 90 in that blank. I don't have to put the amount because I'm not going to sit there with a calculator and bore myself. I'm just going to put 90%. What I do for my clients, and you should do for your clients, is ask the lender that's making the loan, what interest rate do they have to stay under? So if the interest rate right now is 6.5%, and the lender says if it goes to 7, they can't buy, then you need to have 7 in that blank right there. That's on line 88. Initial interest rate not to exceed blank. Line 88. Really important, especially we've already mentioned it, I've mentioned it a few times, and say we, about how fragile the buyers are, especially first-time home buyers. It's just they're in a difficult situation. And so they go from 6.5 to 7, it could throw their whole debt to income ratio out of balance and they won't be able to purchase. The amortization term is typically going to be 30 years. You'll know if it's not. And the rate type is typically going to be fixed. Where she's talking about back in the 80s, I had adjustable on everything because I could get a 2% or 3% lower rate if I got an adjustable. I just had to watch it, make sure it didn't climb too fast. So typically 30. On line 91, they remind you again, if you didn't attach a rider up there that's saying the house, that it was contingent on the sale of a house, then the buyer waives that and they're going to be responsible and have to pay. So you want to make sure that rider is included. All right, on title and survey. This is paragraph 6, page 2. The seller pays for a search, which provides a title commitment. The buyer pays for the buyer's title policy insurance. Okay, that's the way it should be. It's fair and balanced. All right. So you want this to be 10 days on 100. What they're doing is they're looking, the title company's looking at the history on this property. They're doing a search and they're saying it has a marketable title. Or if you attended the title class, title commitment class at noon today, you'd see that sometimes they don't have marketable titles. There can be federal tax liens, state tax liens, child support issues. There could be easements to the property that nobody knows about. There could be roads, whatever. So the title commitment is really important. It's really important that as soon as you get it, because your title company will mail it to you typically and the listing agent, that you send it to your client. But I would suggest also that you might just read through it generally. You're not an attorney, but read through it to see if there's anything that pops up. A good title company will tell you, we've got problems, or you've got problems, or there are problems with this title. They'll say, you know, there's a tax lien on this of $50,000, federal tax lien on the seller. Or they'll say, don't be afraid, the buyer owes child support, Mr. Buyer owes child support of $20,000, or Mrs. Buyer owes child support of $20,000. It can be there. So need to be aware of that, need to work with a good solid title company. All right, you have choices of what you can choose. C is the best choice and the most traditional choice in our market. On A, it says that the seller pays for the commitment and the seller pays for the owner's policy also. That's not fair to the seller. Why do I want to pay insurance, title insurance for a buyer who may live there for 20 years? I paid their entitlement. Nah, I don't want to do that. All right, B, seller gives a title commitment and then issues an owner's policy, and we split it 50-50. Still not fair because the buyer's owner's policy is much more expensive than the title search and commitment. But C says, all right, Mr. Seller, I'm going to pay for the title commitment. Mr. Buyer, you pay for your own policy. That's the fairest way. Now, if you want to make a stronger offer, you asked about that question earlier, brag to the listing agent and look, I'm going to pay for all of it. I'll pay for the title search and the buyer's title insurance. Why? You're talking a couple $100, but it sounds good, doesn't it? You tell the seller that I'm going to pay for the title search and the title commitment. I mean, if you look at your last closing or your next closing, whenever you have it, look to see what the search costs and what the commitment was. It's not that expensive, but it sounds really good. I mean, the sellers will be going like, oh yeah. It's just another way to kind of give yours a little more strength, you know, a better offer. All right. And then the title commitment is going to be issued by Hogan Land and Title. And the reason being, that's where we can deposit the earnest money. And that's where they said we're going to close. So it makes sense for us to have the title issued from there. Now, if you look at 107, buyer can have a survey if they want. I've been around long enough that every property we sold got a survey. In town or out of town, didn't matter. Everybody got a survey. But that the title companies started insuring without surveys because the subdivisions have been turned over 2 or 3 times. So we don't need them as much anymore. But the buyer can get one. And if the buyer does a survey and it shows an issue and it's some problem that needs to be corrected by the seller, this then should be, if you're going to get a survey on 112, should be 45 days. Can't get a survey that fast, but it gives you plenty of time to review the title. Because there could be objections. So if you go to page 3, what can the objections be, especially on a farm property? This comes up all the time. There's encroachments, lines are off one way or the other. The seller says he's selling 80 acres. It turns out it's 76. There's an easement through the property the seller may or may not have been aware of. Those are the primary ones. So what happens is then the survey shows that, or the title work shows a problem, child support, whatever it might be. You then give them notice in writing, MSC 2055N, that says, look, you need to fix these things, okay? And then they have 7 days to respond and say what they'll do. If they don't agree to correct all of them and your buyer goes, well, I'm not buying it if it's got 4 less acres or whatever it might be, the contract terminates without any penalty to the buyer. And you just have to remember this, you don't necessarily have to write it down. If the buyer paid for a survey and then it fails to close because there were objections in the survey or the title work, then the seller becomes responsible for paying for the survey. Now, you might have to pursue them to get it. Point is that a survey is not cheap. I mean, survey 10 acres, it's not gonna be cheap, a couple $1,000s probably. So if you do a survey and it costs you a couple thousand, and it turns out we have objections that the seller won't correct prior to closing, then you can pursue the seller because it's in the contract and he signed and agreed to it. But back there on page 2, make sure you put full term of the contract, because if you don't, you can't get a survey in 45 days hardly. Right? Now we get to the fun part, inspections. I want to read this first paragraph on inspections because it's so exciting. No, not really. But look what it says. Doesn't that just scare the hell out of you? The property is being sold in its present condition with no warranties expressed or implied, except as may be given to the buyer in writing. So what is that? That's as is, right? Conditions of the property that are disclosed or clearly visible should be considered by buyer in setting the purchase price or by making correction of such conditions by seller a requirement of this contract. Okay? Do you understand all that? I'll explain it to you. That's what I do. You walk into a house and the glass is broken in the door, right? What do? Write it in the contract. Okay? You don't wait for an inspector to say anything. You write it in the contract. Seller to replace glass in front door prior to closing. Okay? You walk into the house and there's a hole in the ceiling. You write in the contract. Seller to repair a hole in the ceiling. Don't wait for an inspector. You walk into a bedroom and it's dog butt ugly. It's got black carpet and it's just worn out. The dog has just chewed it up and all that. It's got black walls and a black ceiling and black lights. Your buyer goes, oh no. So what would you do if it's light blue and it had new carpet? I'd buy it. Right? Seller replace carpet, paint the walls light blue, prior to closing. I mean, those are the things you do as a buyer's agent to help your buyer. Or what do? House is priced at 200, walk in, broken glass, hole in the ceiling, dogs ate up the carpet and the room's all black and got black lights in it. Price at 200,000 and what do you advise your buyer? Run like that.
195.
Yeah, you reduce the price. So it's reduce the price, and we can make that, we can let the seller know through his agent that these are the reasons we've done that. Now, the last couple of years, all of us as buyer's agents were kind of challenged by that. Because what happened was the properties were going so fast and at more than they were actually listed for, you couldn't ask for anything. You couldn't ask for concessions. You couldn't offer under market value where it should be because everybody was paying more than they were worth, in my opinion, for at least 2 years. So where it wasn't a good plan a year ago, now it's a good plan. I don't have any problem at all writing an offer for less than full price. None. And all this morning on the CMA panel, if you were here, talking about 30 showings and 7 offers. I haven't seen that lately. I mean, I was looking through the pendings today, and on the pendings, I was checking the dates. Listed 6:30, listed 6:22, listed 6:18. Only a few are going really quick like that. So I don't know where houses they're listing. They're great agents, that's all I can say, because I haven't seen a lot of that. So I think now, if you do your CMA for your buyer and you look at it and say, CMA is a comparative market analysis, comparing the prices, and you see that it's overpriced, then you shouldn't pay over. You should tell your buyers, say, look, I've done a CMA. I really think the value is right about here. Now you can pay whatever, I really want it. Okay, then you should probably pay close to full price. Or typically what they'll say a lot of times is, that's exactly what I was thinking. It was probably a little overpriced. And listen, there's nothing wrong with that. You make the offer. This wouldn't be an unusual conversation before the last nutcase stuff of 2 years. That you would, you look at it and you offer what you feel like is a fair price at market value. And if you have to prove it, send your comps along with them. We bought one in Willard. The agent I worked with, I'd shown the buyer a few houses and she went out to show her a couple of houses and she found one she liked and was listed at $235. One of those 1,200 square foot, 322 with little brick in the front and vinyl. And she sent it to me. She said, I just kind of feel like this is overpriced, a little overpriced. What do you think? Went back, looked at it. It should be $215. That's where it should have been. And she says, what do you suggest I do? I said, well, hell, write the offer at $215. That's where it should be. And then I sent her comps. So send the comps along with it. The girl who had done it, that listed it, had used comps outside of the neighborhood and come up with a price of $235. And she was right. Outside of this neighborhood, there's comps were all $235, $245 or whatever. But this neighborhood was $215. And so we got it for $215 with $5,000 in concessions. But that's where you're representing your buyer, right?
Right.
Okay, we'll go on with this. Now, here's the other part that you're not gonna like. And I'm gonna paraphrase, I'm not gonna read this. The buyer may appraise or inspect the house himself or hire somebody to do it. Now, you heard that, but you didn't hear it. The buyer may appraise or inspect the house himself. I doubt if the lender is gonna let the buyer appraise the house, but he will let him inspect it. And some buyers, type A, they think, hell yeah, I'm an inspector. So they go inspect the house themselves. That's fine. If you're on the buyer's agent side, you just need to explain to them, if you do inspect it, then you're going to have to provide some type of written report or photos or something to go along with any requests that you make for the
That's
seller
not
to repair.
something you would typically, I don't want to say encourage, but
No, you wouldn't
you
encourage.
kind of discourage it, like, hey, we want to hire somebody.
Well, anybody's been a contractor at one time or another, they think they can do it themselves. I don't encourage it. I mean, I don't want us to pay $485 for an inspection. Same time, it's kind of like an insurance policy,
Yeah.
So, but they can, if they tell you they're going to do it themselves, you just, say, that's great. I just want you to understand that if you do the inspection yourself, you probably need to take photos, you probably need to take good notes because you're going to have to provide an inspection report to the seller if you ask for any repairs. People don't like that for some reason. Okay, this paragraph is inserted here for some reason that I don't understand. The property data paragraph, which is also called the buyer's remorse paragraph, it says within X number of days, 5 if none stated, that the buyer can do a property data review. Now, they've got some legitimate things in here, such as, let's see, zoning, regulations, taxes, school districts, square footage or land improvements, presence of registered sex offenders or other convicted criminals, called the property data. But notice it doesn't say it's limited to. So really, what can happen during that data period, if they put 5 days in there, they can terminate the contract at any time for any reason, any reason. They wake up with a headache, they take their mother-in-law over to the house, and this is what's happened. And the mother-in-law goes, I can't believe you're buying in this neighborhood. Look at that paint color. Terminates. No penalty, just terminates. So what I do as a listing agent, if I get this offer, except in this case, cash offer, we'd only been on the market a few days, I always counter that and say no. In fact, I had a counter ready for the seller to send back to the buyer, and it had this in it, that they had to have 0 in there. I was going to put 0, not 5. I just don't think it's a good paragraph because it says you can look for these things, but a lot of times when I'm working with buyer clients, I will tell them, especially the sex offender thing. If they've got small children, and they're concerned about that, there's plenty of websites, Highway Patrol, Greene County, whatever county you're in, and the city police, all have these lists of registered sex offenders where they live. It doesn't catch everybody, but it catches most of them. But if I knew there was a sex offender across the street or living next door, and I was showing a mom, dad, and 2 small children, I'd be like, there's a sex offender right there. Now, we're not supposed to be allowed to do that. But, you know, I don't care. You know, that's called tortious interference in a contract. But the point is, I feel morally responsible, so I would tell them. But if they are concerned with that, they really need to do their own research. You can point them there, but you can't do it for them. But if I know, I'm going to tell them for sure. All right. So property data period, we should be at 0 days in my opinion. But if you put, if it's got 5 days in there, anytime within those 5 days, they could terminate that contract without penalty. You wouldn't have to ask a single question. And there wouldn't be any argument from you either. Okay, we're on page 3, line 152 on inspection reports. And this is where I was talking about if the buyer does their own inspections, they still have to provide a report. So buyer at buyer's option expense obtain written inspection reports of the condition of the property as reasonably deemed necessary by buyer or its lender, including but not limited to the condition or presence, and it goes on and on and on. So what can you inspect for basically? Mold,
Termites.
termites, structural, mechanical. How about everything? There you go. You can inspect for everything. I tell this story because it cracks me up still yet. I don't know how long ago it was. I was in Springfield though. I wrote a contract on a house and the lady wanted to have it inspected for evil spirits. Serious. And I said, okay. I said, well, who do we have do that? She goes, well, I know somebody. She knows she does it. She's a spiritual, whatever. Came in her moo and all that into this old house. It was an old house. Anyhow, she around with her stuff and all this and dinging things and things like that and spinning around and all that. Unfortunately, unfortunately, she goes, there are evil spirits here. And I said,
Hey, what if she finds something? Is she gonna put on a contract like I found the spirits in the house?
so anyhow, I asked her, I said, well, how do we get rid of them? And she said, we could do a seance. She said, sometimes prayer works too. And I said, let's hold hands. She didn't think that was funny. I thought it was funny. I was going to pray like hell.
Right.
Probably wouldn't work that way. Point is, anyhow, you can inspect for anything. And they found evil spirits, contract fell apart. I fired the buyer because I thought I'm not going through this again. I don't know if it ever sold. I'm sure it sold. It was just one of the old houses in Southeast one down around the college. Nice house. Back then it was, you know, it doesn't matter. You can inspect for anything. All right, once you inspect, now, in the contract on the inspection notice, what you want to do, if you're a buyer's agent, you always write 15 days. Just listen to me. You put 15 days for the inspection notice. That's how long it's going to be. Because then you have an additional 5 days, whether you want it or not.
So are you talking about on line 160 where it says 10 days, but you'd still put the 15?
Yes, I never put 10.
Okay.
I always put 15. And here's the reason. If it's busy, like it was a couple of years ago or last year, I mean, just super busy, you might not be able to get an inspector for 5 days. So you're already 5 days into the contract. And then if they have an issue and you need a specialist, you can automatically get 5 days. But a lot of times, here's generally, just listen to me just a second. That 5-day specialist period, you can use it for anything. So even if you're getting kind of towards the end of your inspection period, just tell the other agent in writing, it has to be a text or an email, or you can use a notice and just say, I need an additional 5 days. Just want to let you know for the inspection. You don't have to say, I've got to get a roofer or a foundation specialist or whatever it is. But you do need that. If you need it, you immediately send it over. And so if we have 10 days in here and we get 5 days into the contract and then they do the inspection and then the guy doesn't get it back for 48 hours, now you're 7 days into the contract. You got 3 days to meet with your buyer and try to decide what you want to do. And
So that
sometimes,
just kind of takes the pressure off.
yeah, takes all the pressure off.
Okay.
Unless you're on a rural property. Because if you have a rural property, you got 15 days to do the mechanical structural inspection and the sewer and termite and structural and water. And the sewer, you have to have typically kind of a specialist to do that. But water, takes at least 48 hours to get back too. So if you have a problem with the septic, if somebody says, well, you need to get a specialist to look at it, those guys aren't running around everywhere. There's only like 5 of them in the whole area. So you got 15 days built in, and then you got 5 more days. Or at least you've got 20 days, right? We'll put specialist, but it doesn't have to be a specialist. Remember that. 20 days, you should be able to get it done, right? But remember this, you get one shot. And I'm talking in the old days, like 4 years ago or 5, we could send over a mechanical structural inspection and then send over a septic and then send over a well and then send over a termite and then send over a roof. We could send over 5 notices. But now you have to send one notice with all the things that your buyer wants addressed one time. That's why the 20 days is important. Now you've got the inspection done. You've talked to him, you've discussed it with him, he's reviewed it and says, I want this done.
So you're talking, so we're gonna send out an inspector, he's gonna come out and inspect the property. And then he's gonna tell us everything that's wrong, and then we're gonna send out specialists to come out and tell us that. Is that kind of what you're saying?
No, you could do that. But the other option is this. Your inspector goes out, the mechanical structural inspector, main inspector, okay? Whole home inspector. He does the termite, maybe you can do the septic too. And he takes a well sample and he tells you in the inspection report, the roof appears to have some damage on it. I suggest that you get a roofer. Hell, what's the easiest way to do that? Go get a roofer? No, the easiest way is to write into the inspection notice, seller to repair or replace the roof per the inspection report. And if a roofer comes out and goes, there's nothing wrong with it, fine. But then they do it. You've taken that weight off your buyer. You've taken that time frame where you've got to call a roofer, make arrangements and all that. Put it all on the seller that you can.
Well, because it's still under their insurance. So it's.
Well, not only insurance, but you've taken the responsibility off of you. You're not the one trying to determine whether the roof's bad.
Okay.
The roofer is. And the roofer could be contacted by the seller just as easy as they could by you. So you just simply put, if it's noted in the inspection report, seller to repair or replace the roof per the inspection report. So then the seller busts her butt to get a roofer out there to look at it, and the roofer goes, there's nothing wrong with it. Fine. But you didn't have to do it. All right.
Can the home inspector do the radon? Or does
Yeah.
it take a different person?
Nope.
I think the last house I bought, I think he looked at the septic tank, the roof, the radon, he did everything.
Yeah, we just had one in Rockaway. They did the radon and the septic. So, a lot of these guys are qualified now, but they had to go through training to do it. We didn't have that even 10 years ago. You had to have a septic guy come out and you had to have a termite guy come out and you had to have the roof. Everybody came out separately. Now, a lot of these guys are trained to do most of that in one shot. Like what they'll do is like on Rockaway, they set the radon 2 days earlier than they did the inspection, and they picked up the radon on the same day they did the inspection so they could turn in the results all at the same time, which makes sense too. Yeah, that's the guy you want.
Yeah.
You want a list of inspectors that can do pretty much everything because you are limited on time. And if you make a mistake and put 10 in there, you better be on it. You better really pay attention because it's not your responsibility because the contract's between the buyer and the seller, but you're the buyer's agent that's guiding this individual through the contract. And so you've got to make sure that in writing, you have sent an inspection notice within that time frame, whether it's the 15 or the 20, you still got to get it to them in that time frame in writing. Now, once we send that, the inspection notice, now we've entered the resolution period. So what that means is we decided these are the items that we want to be repaired. We've got a roof, we've got maybe nothing on the septic, got termites that need to be treated and all that. We write that up and we got 10 items in the inspection notice. And we send that over to the seller, listing agent. The listing agent presents it and the seller goes, I'm not doing all 10, I'm only doing 5 of those items. Okay? He's still within his 10 days. So he sends that back and says, I'm only doing 5. And it turns out that some of the 5 he's not doing are the big ticket items. And so your buyer goes, look, you know what? If he'll do these 5 items, the roof, the septic, all these big ticket items, then I'll go ahead and buy the house. So you send it back to the seller and the seller goes, I'll do 3 of those and 2 of the other. And so they send it back. You can go back and forth as many times as you want to, and you can make a change to that document every time. What's the end goal in the 10-day period?
Inspections?
Get everybody agreeing.
That's right. Because by the end of the 10th day, we have to have a written agreement with both signatures on it, all parties to that agreement. So we send it over and it can go back and forth as many times as you want. But at the end of that 10th day at midnight, you want to have signatures of both parties on there. That's the goal. That's why it's called a resolution period. You're trying to resolve whatever you're asking for. Yeah. It's really important that you stick to these dates and stay, really pay attention to them. And some of you that are younger, you'll put it in your phone and stuff. Me, you know, I write it on my hand. Like, oh my God, I only got one day left.
Transaction fee. We have help keeping up with all these dates.
What, these guys?
Yeah.
Oh, is that what you're gonna
Closers?
do? That's what y'all
No,
do?
her, she does it.
She does.
You're the one?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, you pay them. I mean, listen, if I was by myself, I would probably do that, but I've been working.
What a life.
Yeah, I mean, the deal is with technology, you can do a lot of this stuff yourself now. You can,
Maybe in a few months.
but yeah, that's exactly right. But when I first started working in real estate in the last century, I think I'd been at work 4 days and I hired an assistant. I hadn't
Well,
sold
that's what it
anything.
is.
I went to my wife and I said, I just hired the secretary. And she said, why? You haven't even sold anything. I said, I can sell stuff, but I'm not working on this paperwork. I'm not gonna do it. And so I've always had somebody to help me,
Okay.
but I can do it. And I will. I just don't like to. I mean, I'm kind of like you. I want to go home and not do anything.
Right.
Or that's why you guys exist.
Yeah.
And they do a hell of a job and they keep track of everything, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm in.
I know. Think about that though. A business was created by me completely out of nowhere because that didn't exist. I mean, you could hire, like the girl I hired back in 1996, I paid her $24,000 a year. But you can hire these guys for what? $250 a transaction? How much is it?
350
Yeah.
or 3.
And then
Yeah.
it's protecting your $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 commission for $250. That's a bargain because I was paying not only $24,000 a year, but I was paying Social Security and everything else.
And then the client pays the $250.
And I had to talk to her every day
Yeah.
because she was my assistant, which I don't really have any desire to do, you know. That-
Tell us how you really feel.
She was good too. Oh my God. Okay, so we've done all that. We've got it done. Now we're going to closing, right? Yes, say yes.
Yes.
We're going to closing.
Woo!
I will tell you this though, before we move on. There's always
We're
that.
going to closing.
But
That's why we weren't so excited.
if you look at the contract under inspection notice, and it's a weird place to put it, but I kind of get it. on 169, it says, if an inspection notice is timely given, it shall state if, one, buyer is satisfied with all inspections. Yeah, right. Two, there are unacceptable conditions to be satisfied by seller in a workmanlike manner. It doesn't say professional, it doesn't say master craftsman, it says in a workmanlike manner. And prior to scheduled closing date unless otherwise specified. Or three, look at that one. What does that remind you of? That reminds you of line 145, the property data period. Buyer elects to terminate the contract, basically with no penalty to the buyer. That stinks, doesn't it? They had an inspection, they really didn't find anything wrong, and now they're terminating the contract. So I don't think that's a fair and balanced contract. I don't know about you, but I don't think it is. So when I get an offer like this, what you have to do is have line 175 checked. So you would basically counter that offer, in my opinion, and tell the buyer's agent, I'm sorry, but I want you to check 175 because we want to at least have an opportunity to make repairs. We want to at least review the inspection notice and say, yeah, we'll fix all that because we really do want to sell. But if that's not checked, the buyer can just say, see ya, and I'm over with it. So if we look back over on this contract. Let's start reverbing again. They checked the box, which is what we wanted right here, see? So they did an inspection, okay? And I'm not going to keep you forever, so I won't go in, I won't show you it. But they sent over an inspection notice and it said, microwave's got something broken on it and the doors are rubbing, one of my pet peeves. And there's 6 items. Or seller to give $1,000 credit at closing. Well, my clients are 81 years old. What do you think that I voted for?
Give them some money.
Yeah, give them some money. $1,000. It would have taken 3 different contractors to do the work that was requested. So I just said, let's just give him the credit. He said, oh, heck yeah. I mean, he was all for it. But you get that option sometimes. If you get that option, you need to kind of weigh that with your buyers and say, you know, what do you think? You know, let's say your buyer says he's handy or she's handy or they're handy or whatever. So you know what, we can fix most of this stuff. Why don't we just get a credit? You know, just figure out what you think it is. Now, unless they're roofers, don't do the roof. You know, unless they're termite specialists, don't do the termites. But things that they could fix, you might do that and just get a credit. But if you don't have 175 checked, and this is, you know, your buyers we're talking about, then the seller doesn't get a chance to do any of that. The contract's just terminated. Now, what's the other thing that stinks about that? Number one, I'll tell you, you don't get paid. You're going on to another contract. Look at this though. We're 20 days into the contract. We've been off the market as sellers 20 days. Your buyer's already paid for an inspection and started the appraisal process, you know, and they're 20 days in and now they terminate the contract because it'd be 20 days at midnight. I don't think that's fair and balanced. And so I always have my buyers check 175. And we don't argue about it, but we do discuss it if they want to discuss it. I just think it's a fair way to go. And I always tell them this, what can you do to destroy a contract or try to get a contract terminated, even if you've got that checked?
So if that's checked, do you have to worry about E, the resolution period? Or do you just
Well,
leave
you
that?
still have to do the
10 as the-
resolution period.
Well, but do you mark the 10 days or you just leave it and be 10 days as,
No, we don't want to give the seller any more time than that.
okay,
It's
just
like to be 5 days actually. But 10, they may have to get bids and stuff like that, so it's okay.
Okay.
One of the things you can do for a buyer, and people do this, and I'm not encouraging, I'm just saying you can. If your buyer decides, you know what, I made a mistake, this house is in too rough a shape, it's got too many things going on. If it's written on the 40-page inspection report, you can write it up and have the seller fix it. I don't care what it is, as long as it's included in writing in that inspection report. It's not the fairest, most honest way to do it, but you work for your buyer, and if your buyer tells you to do that, then you do it. All right, we're going on to page 4. You're gonna like this. You start in paragraph F, you don't have to worry about the capitulation deal. It's really, that's got a little confusing. If you get to the end of an inspection resolution period and you're about to make a decision like that, and you read it, look at it, and you call me and I'll explain it to you then. It's a little confusing. But F, governmental inspections, guess what? We don't do them in Springfield, Missouri. The only place in the entire area that I know has a government inspection is Lebanon. $50. Cool, huh?
Let's do it.
All right, now on the broker roll. Buyer and all involved real estate licensees, including the broker assisting the buyer and or seller and their respective licensees, blah, 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 may be present during the inspection of their property and walkthrough. But our presence may just be to assist, nothing else. We're not there to tell, advise, etc. We're just to assist, which goes on to say then, under this 215, under Missouri law, brokers are immune from liability for statements made by anybody that was hired. So as long as we don't say something stupid, then we're basically, we are absolved from anything. We don't have any liability. If the inspector says something stupid, that's not us. We didn't hire him. If the appraiser says something stupid, it's not us. We didn't hire him. As long as we're not the one that says something that kills a deal or damages the transaction, then we're fine. And then we should be good. So just understand that you really have no liability unless you pay the engineer or pay the inspector, and you're responsible, your name's on that, then you're liable. So when a buyer says, okay, we're under contract, who do I use as an inspection? I say, here's some choices. They say, which one would you choose? I say, I've had good luck with both of those. You know, if you want to call them, go ahead, you know. No, you tell me which one. And I say, well, you know what? Last one we had was D2. They seem to do a good job. Call D2. So I call D2 and set the inspection because I want to be in control of that, right? I've only got 15 days. And I give them my buyer's phone number and email. And so D2 immediately contacts the buyer and says, give me your credit card information. So they've hired them. All I've done is set the appointment. There's a lot of difference from a legal standpoint. You don't want any liability, right?
Right.
You don't want any liability. All right, now under home warranties, everybody used HSA, and then HSA, for some reason, we lost our regional guy, and it kind of just went away. I mean, they were in our sales meeting, team meeting, they're walking around the halls all the time. And then now CHOSA, a lot of people are using that. I've never used it, but it's always going to ask you this, and that's protection for your buyer. It says, are you getting a home warranty that's provided by the buyer or the seller, or they already have one in place? So in this case, buyer acknowledges the seller is not providing a home warranty plan or service agreement. Buyer may purchase one separately. And that's just something that was added to the contract to protect the buyer. Okay, way back in the front, remember they put down $1,000 in earnest money. Remember that? Okay, let's say, not going to cross something to this. This contract falls apart, all right? And the buyer says, I want my earnest money back. And so he sends over a mutual release. If you're in team meeting this morning, I've been signing a lot of those. But the seller goes, nah, I'm not signing it. You know? I don't care if you want it or not, you know, I'm keeping it. Well, they don't really get to keep it because the $1,000 in earnest money goes immediately into an escrow account at the title company. And it sits there till heck freezes over. The only way it can come out is with it, with the signature of both parties to the contract, or if a broker orders it in writing. You think I'm gonna do that? Not with somebody else's money. I'm not doing that. Too much liability. That's the only way, okay? If the mutual release is not signed, releasing the earnest money, and I don't order it as a broker, and the other agent can't do it either, the other broker can't do it, then it stays there. Guess how long? 365 days. And then guess what happens?
It's the state treasury.
It goes to the state treasurer's office as unclaimed funds. Guess how long it stays there?
So somebody claims
Till
it.
somebody claims it. The only way to get it out of there is to send a notarized statement signed by both parties to the contract saying, hey, we've reached a resolution. We'd like for you to release the money. So the state treasurer releases the money. Guess where they send it to? Title company, escrow account.
It goes back to the title company?
Oh, yeah. And then guess what happens?
Again?
What do you got to have then?
A mutual.
A mutual release signed by both parties.
Why all that
True.
stuff? Like,
Lawyers.
easier just to do
Lawyers.
that in the first place.
Yeah, that'd be easier, but people will fight over $200 in earnest money, so it's crazy. I just want to make you aware of that, because at some point in your career, contract's gonna fall apart, there's gonna be earnest money, and the people are gonna fight about it. And they're gonna say, why are you holding my earnest money? You're not. Thank God Keller Williams doesn't have an escrow account. It's a title company that's holding your earnest money, and they have to follow the guidelines. This is actually, where's that? It's a statute that tells them how to do this. But it's really funny. Oh, there it is. 339.105.bar4 RSMO. They're required by statute to do that. See, so I'm not holding your earnest money. You go talk to the title company. And the title company's gonna go, oh, you know, I can't release this unless they have the signature of both parties. But it is a battle. So when my clients ask me how much earnest money you put out, I tell them,
Zero.
you don't have to put down any if you don't want to. It's not required under the contract. But if you want to, and say, well, you know what, we really do want to, because we really want to buy this property. We want to strengthen our offer. Does it strengthen your offer to have earnest money down?
Nope.
What do you mean?
Sometimes.
If nobody else has earnest money down and you have earnest money down, oh yeah.
Oh, it does? Okay.
Because it's real money. It's coming out of your pocket. It's going in the escrow account. If it's a check, it's getting cash. And it's coming out of your bank account. It's real money. So yeah, that's why it's
You know,
called.
There's multiple offers and this is gonna be like a backup. You want to,
It doesn't matter either.
the
on that.
time frame is the priority,
No.
not the deposit, not the.
If you're in a
earnest-
backup position, it doesn't get cash until you move into first position. So the earnest, I mean, you don't really, it's earnest money, but it's not there.
When does the earnest money go to the seller's pocket?
It doesn't. It's subtracted from the purchase price at closing.
Okay.
So the seller doesn't really get it. Now, some builders will say, I want $5,000 in earnest money with the check made out to me. And they're putting it right in their pocket. You look confused.
Well, yeah, I'm newbie, so I read that it strengthened it,
Yeah, it
but
does strengthen. I agree.
Yeah,
Look, if there's three offers sitting on the table, $200,000 house, 200,000, 200,000, 200,000. No earnest money, $5,000. Who's got the best offer? As of right now, looking at those terms and conditions of $5,000. And then we go down to closing date. This closing's 45 days, this closing's 45 days, this closing's 30 days. This offer's a lot better so far. We turn the page. Appraisal, no appraisal. This is looking really good.
So that, yeah, the last couple of years, so you've had like 3 contracts show up to the
Or
the
10,
seller in a day, or during a period of time where
Well, probably, yeah.
they could have a choice between offers. Okay.
Oh, yeah, you get, I mean, you get a choice until you accept one, even until it closes. Now, remember this, you can accept offers on a property all the way to closing. It's not done just because it goes under contract. You can take backup offer after, you can take multiple backup offers.
I've never looked at it that way. Cool.
Yeah, there's no reason not to.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, a great property, if you really wanted it and you had time, you could put a backup offer because you can withdraw a backup offer at any time prior to it moving into first position.
Right,
So you don't have, really, you're not at risk.
right. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So. Just remember that. You can summarize that for your clients if you want to. On paragraph 9, which goes on to the next page on loss and condemnation, guess what? We don't have earthquakes very often here, but we do sit pretty close to a fault. But we do have tornadoes and fire and wind and floods occasionally. So your house could be destroyed. So the contract allows that if it is destroyed, that the buyer can still buy it and receive the insurance proceeds to the amount of the contract.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And here's the example I used to use. It's not as good as it used to be. I used to go over to Southern Hills, which is a really preferred subdivision in Springfield. People really liked it. You could buy a house over there for $150,000. Well, I mean, if it burned down tomorrow, you might want to go ahead and take the $150,000 insurance proceeds and rebuild because it'd be worth $250,000. But that doesn't happen very often. Because you'd have a foundation, water, sewer, it'd be in a great subdivision, and you'd have $150,000 to put towards rebuilding the house. Well, you used to could build for $150,000. If you had all those things in place already, you could build almost a $300,000 home. Can't do it anymore, but you could back then. So I don't recommend that anymore, but it doesn't happen very often. But a few years back, we had tornadoes in Battlefield, and we had homes under contract, 1 or 2 that were destroyed and some that were damaged. The other choice is you can go ahead and continue with the contract, but the house has to be returned to at least its original condition when you wrote the offer. Point is simply, house burns down, the buyer can terminate the contract without penalty. That's really where it comes down to. Or even if it's severely damaged, they can terminate the contract without penalty because the condition with which it was in when they wrote the offer has changed radically. All right, paragraph 10, don't even look at it. Stop. Go to line 302. When it comes to adjustments on closing costs and concessions that are allowed by the seller, guess who determines that?
The buyer?
Not the buyer,
Seller.
not the seller,
Just kidding.
The lender.
the lender. The lender gets to make the final decision on that. So if I ask for $5,000 in concessions, then my buyer does, then the lender is going to do everything they can to take the entire $5,000 to reduce the cost to the buyer, every penny if they can. But I don't get to say, no, you can't do that, or no, you can't do that. You can't do it as a buyer's agent. I can't do it as a seller's agent. My seller can't do it, and the title company can't do it. The lender gets the final say. That's what it says on 302 down there. It says the lender gets to make that final say. Now, one of the things they can't use concessions for, or a couple things are listed there also, which are the cost of a home warranty, title fees paid by the seller, or any brokerage or transaction fees charged by the buyer's broker. That can't be charged to the buyer or to the seller. The buyer can charge it, but it can't be, can't be paid for out of concessions. Now, you charge a buyer's fee?
Yes.
How much?
Transaction fee, 250.
250?
250, 350, just.
Okay. Oh, you just started. Listen, I don't charge one, but it's just because I'm old. And when I was with Remax, I charged it. When I was at Carroll Jones, even though I sold and was a broker over there, I still charged it. My wife charged it.
So do you
At
pay
Reese
for
and
it?
Nichols, they charge one is $250, but it doesn't go to the agent. It goes to the company. And you gotta charge it, or you have to pay it out of your commission. The beauty of charging a fee like that, an administrative fee, whatever you want to call it, is it goes to you. It doesn't even get split.
That 250 doesn't go to us though, it goes,
No, it goes to you.
and then I pay them, is that what?
Oh, if you pay them, if you're charging $250, you're just paying them for whatever.
Yeah.
But you could charge $250 and do it all yourself, and you get to keep the $250. It's not split with the company.
I did once, but it's so many details. I said, no, next time you guys do it.
Yeah, well, it's just okay, but my point is this, as a buyer's agent, you're gonna do a lot of work showing people property and things like that. This is just additional income that you can charge that goes to you. It doesn't get split with the company. Okay? I mean, once you're capped, it doesn't matter, everything goes to you, but the point is, if you do 20 contracts a year and you charge $200 a contract, that's an additional $4,000 for you, which would almost pay your Immaculate Conception tuition for my child. But it would buy shoes and a vacation. 4,000 would be a decent vacation, right? You could go to Branson and spend like a week.
You put that in the contract, the
Yeah.
250? Okay.
In the employment agreement, it has a spot there that says, what's your fee? Your fee. And then it has another one that says, what's the commission paid? They're actually two different things. So, and it's a flat fee, and it says, when will it be collected? Will it be collected now? Because you can charge it right up front. You can get a check for your services right up front. Not a bad idea, actually, because go to the dentist, what do they want?
Yeah.
Lawyer?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter. Any professional charges up front, except us. But you can get it up front. There's a lady down in Reed Springs. She's still an agent. She's been in there for a long time, longer than me. And she charges $1,000 if she's showing farms up front. Check right now.
What's her point?
Because she's going to be driving all over H showing property, you know. If you ever showed farms, man, it's not like this.
Yeah, I mean, they are. I don't want one, but
I mean, you could be all over the entire market area. And she has, and especially down around Branson, she's in Reed Springs or was, but she might be going to Aurora, and then from Aurora to Shell Knob, and from Shell Knob to Omaha, Arkansas, if she's licensed down there, but she could be going all over. Anyhow, she decided, you know, if I'm gonna be driving, 500-600 miles in a day, showing you property and walking all over through tick infested properties, I'm charging you $1,000. She just right up front. I'm like, do they pay it? Well, yeah. I'm like, dang. Janet Parsons has been charging $495 a transaction since 1996, at least, on both sides of the transaction. You charge whatever you want to, because you got to figure what your value is, and you think about it. I mean, I've got to buy some buyers right now, so mature buyers, older than I am, who I've been showing for 11 months. You got 2 houses to sell and they want to buy a big property and they just can't find the right fit, which is fine, but I ain't got any money up front. Now, I'm thinking about it, telling them, I checked out the mileage on my truck. You need to go ahead and cut me a check now before we write any offers,
So are we limited to just Greene County?
No, you can
Okay.
sell all over the state,
Okay,
state of Missouri.
okay, good.
I try to stay within about I really like a 50-mile radius. But I have sold in West Plains. I mean, it doesn't
I had a
bother me.
couple of properties, one in Hollister and one in Branson, so I'm down there, so.
Well, you know the problem. You've lived down there, right?
Yeah.
So,
10 years.
listen, I mean, the thing I don't do is I don't go out on my service area. If I'm going to West Plains, I'm not gonna show a house, I'm showing a farm. You know, and probably more than one, and it's probably gonna be, you know, I won't name any cities, but 2 or 3 cities down there. I'm gonna, you know, I'm not gonna go spend my day to show one house,
Right.
$150,000, $250,000. I'll refer it down there. But if I'm gonna show farms, I'll drive down there.
Right.
But I'm not gonna go to Lebanon to show property either. It's only 55 miles away. We've got an office up there. We got one in West Plains. But if it's a farm, I might drive to Lebanon. But I don't limit myself like that. I'm not gonna go to Joplin, just like Joplin seems further than anywhere.
Because
I'm not sure why. I mean, once you get to downstream, it's okay, but just Joplin just seems like.
Buffalo's easier to get to.
Buffalo, Missouri? Oh, yeah. All right, so that broke into a long conversation that probably wasn't necessary, but line 302 and 303, the lender decides what can be charged in concessions. Nobody else, nobody gets any influence over it. But you can't charge a home warranty, you can't charge the title fees paid by the seller, and you can't charge any of your transaction fees. So if you tell your buyer you're charging $250, it's going to be on the HUD, on the closing statement, on their side of the statement that they're paying that out of their funds. All right. Paragraph 11, it's a binding contract. We've all signed it. We agreed. But it gets that binding means we're held together legally. The contract can be assigned. And this is fairly simple in that if I enter into a contract, you and I, and I'm going to buy your house. And then I work for Jack Henry, and Jack Henry buys a company in North Dakota and says, "Gee, I'm sorry, we're transferring you. You know, you're leaving in a week." Well, the contract says I'm still under contract, whether I get transferred or not. I'm still liable for it, right? So I go to Brad, right? Braden. I go to Braden. I say, "Braden, look, man, I'm getting transferred, but I'm buying this house." He goes, "Where is it?" "I've been looking for a house." I tell him, he goes, "Well, let's go see it." So I call my agent, we go see it. She doesn't know a thing. Braden says, "I'll buy it." I said, "Well, you've got to at least do an FHA loan." He said, "No, I'm gonna pay cash." That's fine. You can go up, you can't go down, right? Braden says, "I'll buy it." So we write a simple amendment, 1-page amendment that says, all parties agree that the buyer is Braden, okay? And then all of us sign it. I sign it, Braden signs it. We send it to the sellers and say, "Look, Jim got transferred, but Braden's gonna buy the house. He's paying cash." And they can't refuse it. They've got to allow it, as long as we honor the same or better terms and conditions of the original offer. That's cool, isn't it? So what happens a lot of times is the straw buyer buys something. So like when I was in Branson, the Hershens couldn't buy anything because if they were even interested in it, the price went up, right? Same thing here with the O'Reillys, John Q. Hammonds when he was alive, Jack Stack, anybody that's notable. Jim Bolin, price always goes up whenever I try to buy anything. Anyhow, there was a guy that owned a radio station in town, local radio station, and he wanted to buy a winery out in Mount Vernon. People wouldn't sell it to him. Or he's going to put in a winery. He wanted to buy their land. They wouldn't sell it to him because they didn't like it. He was kind of ornery. So anyhow, I bought it. And the day before the closing, what do? We assigned the contract, and they couldn't refuse it at that point. But that happens quite a bit with buyers. Brad Pitt, for example, you know, he lives here, but he bought a lot of property in the area, but nobody ever knew he bought it. What else? Okay, 1031 exchanges. On a 1031 exchange, here's what's happening. I bought a duplex in Branson and it was $100,000 and I fixed it up. And 3 years later, I think, man, somebody wants to give me 300,000. So I'm gonna take that money and run, right? Well, the problem is I've got $200,000 possibly in capital gains, and capital gains are taxed at 21%.
That sucks.
That would suck. It would be $41,000. So I don't want to pay that, right? So I can do what's called a 1031 exchange, which means that I can take this money and buy another investment property. And it's called a like-kind exchange, but it doesn't have to be the same thing. It just has to be an investment property. So I can take the duplex profit, the $200,000 in profit, and I can go buy a farm. Can't buy one for that price. Used to could. But anyhow, you could buy land and just put a cow on there or cut the hay on it, and now it's investment property. Or I could buy a restaurant or a hair salon or a nail salon or whatever I wanted to buy, I could buy it as long as I didn't touch the money. So you close and that money goes into a 1031 account at the title company, and then it gets exchanged. And since I don't touch it, I can't be taxed on it. It's not fair anyway. Just because I work my butt off and make something better and make a profit on it, the government shouldn't get money off of that, especially 21%.
So that would be 6 months, you have 6 months to find.
Yeah, there's a time. Yeah, the deal is if anybody ever tells you they want to do a 1031 exchange, immediately go to your broker and or your title company and they can walk you through the process because there are time limits. Because you can identify, for example, one of the things is you can identify up to 2.5 times the amount of money that you're going to spend. And then you can identify multiple properties, but you only have to close on one within the time frame. It's a little confusing, but the deal is you don't know once you go under contract here what you're necessarily going to buy out here. There might be an exchange. You might be looking at a farm, you might be looking at a restaurant, you might be looking at another duplex, a more expensive one, or maybe a 8-plex. All right, I'm paragraph 12 now on the next page. Are we there yet?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll try to be really fast. The entire agreement, the lawyers say at the state, it's the 8 pages. The 4 corners of the 8 pages of the contract is the contract. That's poop. Because if you ever go into litigation, you're going to have every document that was associated with this contract. So just remember that. And a lot of times the best thing to do if you're including a document and showing it to your seller or your buyers, you know, in a contract, it should be initialed by both parties, whether it's the MLS detail sheet, the tax information, whatever it might be. You probably want to get those initialed and dated so everybody knows it's a part of the contract. And then somebody can come back and say, well, I never saw that. She never showed me that. On 13, on default, we hate to talk about it, but you almost always should at least say something to your clients to the effect of, if you default on the contract, you can face litigation and damages. I want you to understand that. It's on both sides. If I'm representing the buyer, I tell them, so, you know, unless you have a legitimate legal reason to not close on this property, you need to close on the property. Otherwise, you could be in default and they could actually force you to buy the property, which happened last year in our company. Or they could charge you for damages, or they could charge you for any remedy under the law. That's what both of those paragraphs say. So they say exactly the same thing. They just switch the seller and the buyer. And we tell the seller the same thing. Mr. Seller, look, the buyer wants to buy your property. He's gone through inspections. You've made the repairs. Don't default. If you default, then you could face damages. And there can be excessive. The first one I ever went through when I was at Carroll Jones as a broker over there, it took 18 months and it cost $23,000 for attorney's fees. And then the buyer had to buy the house that he walked away from. So here's what I tell my buyers, and you can tell them this too. Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, or whatever pronoun. Here's the deal. Go ahead and close on the house. You've already got your loan in place. We've done inspections. We've had the repairs. Close on it, and you don't have to move in. I'll sell it for you at no cost on the list side. Keller Williams will allow me to do that. You just go close it. You don't ever have to move in. You don't have to do another thing. And it's got a new roof. All these repairs are made. I tell you what I'll try to do. I'll offer it on the market at 3% higher than what you paid for it, and you might not owe anything. But I guarantee you this, you'll owe less than you would if you get sued. I always tell the buyer that.
Good point.
It's a lot less.
Yeah.
And no stress, you know. Have anybody ever been sued? No?
Kind of, sort of, but not really.
Yeah, even the threat of a lawsuit, though, is like,
They built my house and I didn't build it. I bought it when it was built. It was still brand new, but he built it on another parcel of land that went through my garage.
why'd they want to sue you?
Well, because,
Oh, the other person wanted to sue you. because-
yeah, but he built the house. He was the builder. But because my property was on his
That
other parcel of
builder,
land,
he built it on his land and he
So
wanted to
he's-
sue you?
he did, and I didn't have any rights to it. Because we had added on a garage, even though it still went through my regular house and the garage was the addition. We
You went to court?
didn't go to court, we had to settle outside of court, but yes, we
You
were
had to pay
told
him?
we had to buy the property,
That's pretty
the 3
slick on-
acres,
Pretty slick on his part.
wasn't it? And
Where's he at?
he got me, like
Where's that at?
in Morrisville.
Oh, good.
I know, right?
It's not here.
That's mean.
Oh, he was evil. He is, and he's an agent. He's
He
evil.
did it on purpose.
He's
Where's it
evil.
at now again?
It's in Morrisville, up by Bolivar.
What's his name?
I knew you were gonna ask me that. He's evil. If you've ever dealt with him, he's evil and nobody likes him.
Is he attorney?
No, he's an agent.
You can look it up on CaseNet too.
Oh, I can't remember his name. It's been 7 years.
Man, that is evil.
Oh, yeah, he was a wicked.
I feel sorry for you. That's a really bad. I've never heard that. So he builds a house for you, builds it partly on his property.
He didn't build it for me. He built it. What he did was, is he thought the property lines went at an angle. Or he thought they went directly back. Like if you're looking at the road, it went straight back. And they didn't. They went diagonal because the
That's
road
called-
is diagonal.
Oh, title work.
Yes, and so they didn't catch it. And so my house he built to sell, we just bought it. When I figured out, I went to him, hey, let's make this right. And instead he turned it around on me and
I think I would have taken that one to court.
And the
I
title,
probably should
the
have, but
title policy wouldn't,
uh-uh,
they
No, that would
wouldn't.
protect you because you didn't have a survey.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
it
I mean, knowing what I know
probably
now.
meets and bounds description, so they wouldn't have known. They're just insuring that part of the title.
And I had become a widow, and so he just totally took advantage of me.
I wish you'd have been working here so we could have gone after it, but
Yeah, me too.
we would have too. We'd have been on it.
So, yeah,
They had both brokers is calling.
I'll think of his name and come back and tell you, and you'll be like, oh, I
Yeah.
worked with him.
But we don't want to mess with it. We don't want to deal with it.
No. And he's known for that in Bolivar, that he's just.
I mean, there's going to be a group of people. There's 2,000 agents in the board. It's a big board, you know. There's some you just don't want to work with. There's some, if they make you an offer, you really don't want to accept it. And you should tell your clients that this person's not a good person. Their reputation is bad. And that, you know, if we have 2 offers side by side and they're close, take the other person's offer because it'll be a better deal. Because they're going to cause problems all along. All right, so as much as we don't want to, we're going to mention the default clause, aren't we?
Yeah.
Because the options are the same either way, you know. Prevailing party, don't pay any attention to that because it doesn't work in Missouri. On 15, seller's disclosure statement. Listen. A seller's disclosure statement is not mandatory in Missouri. No, you don't have to do it. You do have to do the first 4 items on page 1, which are statutory. Lead-based paint, meth, landfill, and whatever the 4th one is. The point is, those have to be done, and then you can just sign it and be done with it. You don't have to make any other disclosures in the state of Missouri, not required.
Even if you're not selling as is, you still,
Hmm?
even if it's not selling as is, you still can do that, just the 4 items on the front page.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether, I mean, I have an attorney I work with that told me, she said, if I sell my house, I'm not filling out the disclosures. Why would I want to make myself liable? Oh, I'm like, I mean, to me, I just approach it differently. You know, it's the old golden rule.
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna tell everybody everything I know, and that's what I tell my clients to do. I suggest that they always fill it out. The point is this, on this, you've got 3 choices. A, buyer confirmed for signing this, they got to receive the seller's disclosure. Now, the seller's disclosure might not have a thing on it, other than those 4 statutory things, but they did get it. Or B, this is the bad one, seller agrees to provide buyer with the seller's disclosure statement within 1 day, if none stated, after the effective date. Buyer has 3 days to review, and then if they don't like it, guess what? They can terminate the contract without penalty. So here's my point to you as not buyer's agents now, but thinking with your listing agent hat on is make sure you get the disclosure statement loaded up. If you've got one, you load it up into the MLS, even if it doesn't say anything. Because if you don't, and if they have to request it, now they've got 4 days basically to terminate the contract.
So that's why you see in the MLS, because I'm like, why they even put a disclosure, seller's disclosure in there? Because it has nothing filled out. That's why.
If you request one, if you check B, when you make your offer and you don't get it within 1 day for this, you can terminate the contract. It's just another out for the buyer. See, in my opinion, our contract is weighted towards the buyer, isn't it? Remember way back there on 5, paragraph 5? The data period, I don't like it, I'm just leaving. And then you go down to the inspection report, if you don't check 175, the buyer goes, I'm just leaving. Same thing here. So again, and I'm guilty of this as an agent, and I consider myself to be a pretty good agent. Documents aren't my strength sometimes when it comes to stuff like this. Make sure that you get the disclosure online as soon as you push the button that says go active. Because again, wouldn't that be awful? Would you hate to go back to your seller and say they terminated the contract? And he goes, they go, why? Well, I forgot to load the disclosure up. I mean, good. I'd fire myself.
You're gone.
And the C, no seller's disclosure statement will be provided by the seller. Again, if it's statutory, it'll be required. But there are gonna be some people that just hell bent on not signing it. When they do, come see me or see Don or Landon. And what we'll say is put a statement in there that says that they just refuse to sign anything, okay? Also on 355 through 58, it says, look, if I do give you a disclosure statement, I think it's accurate if I'm the seller. And if anything changes, I'm gonna let you know. Like recently, we've had a lot of storms, tree damage and things like that. So if a tree falls on a house, I'm supposed to update my disclosure. If I have an offer on my property and it gets damaged or they find damage, I'm supposed to update the disclosure as a seller. They don't always do that. So keep an eye out for that. Lead-based paint disclosure, if it was built prior to 78, you're gonna have one. And the MLS has finally got smart. You can't even load a listing up if it was built prior to 78 without the lead-based paint disclosure, which is a good move on their part because they kept fighting everybody for it. The better thing to do is just make them do it. And this made them do it. On walkthroughs, the main thing on this is you got to have the utilities on if you're the seller. So if you're a buyer's agent and you go or you tell the other agent, I'm going to do a walkthrough tomorrow, and they go, well, the utilities are turned off. And what you should do is say, you need to see paragraph 17. It's required that the seller turn the utilities on. When to do a walkthrough? The best thing to do is when the house is vacant, right? Can't always do it. So if you have to do it when the house is still occupied, I would suggest that you still go back, at least as the agent, and walk through it prior to closing when it's vacant. It's a good idea because there are things that are hidden, and sometimes people don't mean to hide them. Like they've got a rug over the place in front of the fireplace where they burn a hole in the rug, you know, wood popped out. We had the superintendent of schools, we sold their house one time, he was over in Cooper Estates, and he moved out, and in his dining room, he had this big rug, you know, he'd had it there for 15 or 20 years, and the sun shined in. Now, when he pulled that rug out of there, hell, there was a spot 4 shades different, I mean, it was totally different. The rug underneath, you know, looked like a spaceship had landed or something. Anyhow, I called him, he'd already moved to his lake house, and I said, won't give his name. Hey, we got a problem here, you know, the buyer not gonna buy, he's not gonna close because of this big spot here, you know, where the rug was. I'm sure you saw that when you moved. Oh, yeah. I see, he said, I saw that. I said, what do you wanna do about it? He said, I ain't doing a damn thing. So Holly Stinger was a buyer's agent, and I was a listing agent, or my wife. And anyhow, it was a 12 by 12 formal dining room. We just bought new carpet for it. But it's like, I mean, just, you know, you'd think better professionals than that, wouldn't you? Didn't matter. That's why you do walkthroughs up. Things can change. On signatures, the key part on this is that you can sign it anyway. You know, wet, meaning with a ballpoint pen, marker, you can sign it with a marker if you wanted to. Pencil's probably not a good idea, but you fax it. You can electronically sign it. You can use dot loop, DocuSign, AccuSign, sign here, whatever. So it can be signed in multiple counterparts. They can be signed different ways. So husband and wife, you and I are married. I sign it with a pen. You sign it electronically. That's fine too. It still makes the contract legal and valid. On governing law and construction, everybody gets confused on this. I have a property right now that's got 4 sellers. But you guys are gonna run into these now because the baby boomers are dying. They left the property to their kids. They got 4 kids. They're all married. Now you got 8 people that need to sign. But we don't refer to them as the 8 sellers. We refer to them as the seller. And the 4 buyers, we don't refer to them as the 4 buyers. We just say buyer. So that's all that means right there. But that's, again, it's a lawyer deal. So buyer and seller can mean multiple people. Next page. On notices, all this is saying basically is don't do anything unless it's in writing. Don't do anything. I don't care how much you like me. I'm such a lovely guy. We're in a contract together and I say, don't worry about it. We're gonna fix it. Then you say, put that in writing, Jim. And then we all sign it. Just don't do anything. But here's the deal on notices, and I want you to understand on notices is, all right, so the best example is a counter. I make an offer and you counter, okay? You send me the counter and I have it sitting on my desk, okay? And I get my client to sign it, but I don't send it to you. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It doesn't matter. I could get another offer in, and before I send that back to you, I could accept that other offer. And we had an agent, Dan Holt, at a house that on a Friday received an offer from Tamara Wilson up on the north side. She sent in an offer, they countered. Tamara got the offer and said, I'll have my buyers sign it and I'll get it back to you. And this is on a Saturday. So she got it signed on Saturday at noon. And then she went to a family gathering. And then she, did whatever. And then Sunday morning, she got up and went to church. And then she went to lunch after that. And then she sent it over. And Dan said, Tamara, I'm sorry, but my client received another offer for full price and he accepted that offer. And she said, you can't do that. I've had it signed. Look at the date on it, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, Tamara, paragraph 23 says it doesn't exist until it's sent because it only exists once it's been received. And so we know now using email and faxes and scanners, once we send it, unless it comes back, it's there. They can deny it all they want. In the old days, when I first started working in the old times, you'd call somebody and say, look, I got another offer on that property. And they would say, well, my guy signed it, yesterday. And then they would sign it themselves and put a date on it. and bring it to me or fax it to me, wasn't a damn thing I could say about it. But you can't do that anymore with electronic, because the electronics, once I send that thing, it's there. So just remember, it's valid upon its receipt, which is basically upon its sending. So don't go to family event and then church and then lunch after church and then send it.
There's a picture, you could take a picture, right?
Exactly.
It's good.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. I think that would be as valid. They can't deny that it was there. You take a picture of it and you send it to them. And then send it to you in your email and send it to them again. Now you got it there twice, you know? This, I mean, our lives have been made so much easier as realtors. It's like, that's like worth 50,000 a year right there. All right, on the riders, we talked about the government loan rider. You'd have to have that. And then on the right side, on 392 and 393, if you do have a contingency for the sale of the buyer's existing property, that means it's not sold yet. It's not under contract. The next one, contingency for closing a buyer's existing property, that means that the property is under contract and is scheduled to close. And then let's say you're writing a contract for new construction. This contract right here, it says it on 398, it's not worth a dang for that. It doesn't work very good. What you're doing on new construction with the contract is establishing the price. And then you want to have in special agreements or in other, you can create a Word document that says the builder agrees to black shingles, white tile, green, whatever, that kind of stuff. It would be better to say builder and builder's agent agree to meet within 7 days to make all choices regarding all items allowed under the construction. So tile, vinyl or siding, windows, roof, everything. But you do that separately. Okay? But don't use this contract and try to do it. Just say, let's set up a meeting. Now, some of the builders actually have checklists and they can become a part of the contract. And it says, here's what I'm buying. And they just check it off and everybody initials it. And if you buy a house for yourself, then you must disclose that you're an agent. Or if you're buying a house for your niece, nephew, uncle, brother, I don't know about your ex, but I would say yes, ex-spouse, that you would put that in there. I mean, I go so far as my nieces and nephews, I do it for them if I buy anything for them or if I write it for them. The sources of broker compensation. Typically, it's going to come from the seller. We build it into the seller's fees. But if you're charging an admin fee or a buyer's agent fee, then you'd have to check both boxes. Yeah, you need to, because the MREC will look at the HUD statement and compare it to the contract to see whether you check that box or not. Because what it's saying is the buyer knows he's paying a fee. Okay? And the brokerage relationship, this is easy, really. If you're working for the buyer and you're at Keller Williams, you are a buyer's limited agent and you are designated agents. You're going to check 422 and 428. Because we practice designated agency, which means you are the agent assigned to the client. The brokerage as a whole, we represent him, but you are the only agent that knows all the good stuff about it. All the fiduciary information. So let's say you have a house listed. I'm just going to say this real quick. And you do an open house on that house. So you're a seller's limited agent and you're a designated agent, right? At Keller Williams. And a buyer comes to your open house and says, hey, I really like this. I want to write an offer. And you go, okay, but you understand that I'm representing the seller, but I'll be happy to assist you. And they go, I don't care. I just want to buy the house. So if you were a seller's limited agent and a designated agent on the seller's side, you would be a seller's limited agent on the other side because you're not notice it doesn't say on 421 that you're representing the buyer. It says who's assisting the buyer. Okay? A lot of people get that confused. They automatically assume they're a dual agent. Well, agency says that I know this person and I know financial information and we've actually had a consultation of some type to be an agent for somebody. Not just I met you on the street and you want to buy a house type of deal.
So in that case, which one would be the right one?
Seller's limited agent.
Okay.
So you have a house listed
Mhm.
and a buyer comes to your open house, or a buyer calls you on a sign call and says, I'd like to see this house. And you say, if you've been pre-qualified or you're working with another agent, they go, no. I said, well, I'll be happy to show it to you. I'll be there in a few minutes. And if you get good vibes, you don't take me with you or anybody else, you just go by yourself. But you get there and the buyer goes, I really like this. I want to make an offer on this. And you go, no problem. Now, you understand I represent the seller, but I will be happy to assist you in the transaction. So if you do, when you write the contract, you come over here on the right-hand side of the contract, you're a seller's limited agent and a designated agent. But on the buy side, you're assisting the buyer and you're still a seller's limited agent. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, I've done hundreds of them like that. I've done dual agency and I love it because then I don't have to deal with another agent. It's not about the money. The money's nice. You get double a commission, but not having to deal with another agent's wonderful. You know what I mean? No offense to the agents of the world.
That happened to me last week. But I checked the wrong one. I checked the dual agent, so.
Yeah, you're not a dual agent unless you have a written contract with that buyer. And I know agents do this, but they'll sit down and write the offer and write a buyer's agency contract at the same time and not know diddly about that buyer. They haven't had a conversation with them. They're just writing an offer. And they're suddenly representing them, a fiduciary responsibility to somebody that you met 15 minutes ago. A little shaky with that one. But you can do what you want to. All right, on a broker's firm assisting the buyer or the seller, you can put Keller Williams Realty, you can put Keller Williams, you can put KW, you can put Greater Springfield Realty, you can put Greater Springfield Realty LLC. All of those are acceptable. The firm state license number, it's on every listing. I can't memorize it for some reason. I can remember anything, can't remember it. So I have to look every time. You're probably going to put it in your phone, right? I'm not going to do that. I'm too dumb to do that. I don't know how. Signature is you, and then the licensee's printed name is you, and then your state license number is the one that's on every one of your listings. Mine's 1999-032351, but I can't remember the company's number. But you should know your number. And again, if you'll go into your membership, your license number is there too, along with your NERD's number. All right, last page. Woo-hoo, you say, woo! That only took 2 hours and 10 minutes so far. We are a franchise. We're acknowledging that. That's the reason it has it on here. The sales information on paragraph 27. That's going to go to the MLS unless we have a document signed that says no sales disclosure. What it does is it helps us establish the property market value of houses and residents and property in the market area. So we want it to. It doesn't get disclosed to the government in the state of Missouri, except in St. Louis and Kansas City. So it only goes to the MLS. The MLS uses it to establish market value. So if you're selling in a subdivision and there's been 3 other house sales in there and they're basically the same, you've got a general idea of what the market value is. And that's why we do it, try to establish market value. Now, on 28 and 29 on FERPTA and anti-terrorism, that is not your job. Don't do that. You don't try to determine whether somebody's a terrorist or not, all right? I don't, and if they speak 2 languages or 3 languages, that's not your job to determine whether they're a foreign national or a foreign whatever. The title company will do that. Okay? We had for a few years, and I think we still have some, a lot of Chinese nationals coming in and buying property. They bought investments for rental property and things like that. I don't care, right? Who am I gonna sell property to? Anybody who wants to buy it, I don't care. But I am not gonna I'm not gonna ask you if you're a terrorist or you're foreign, or can you buy or can't you buy? So don't do that. That's the title company does that. And then on the acceptance deadline date, here's the deal. For 2 years, we couldn't even write anything in there because nobody would let us. They said, well, we're not gonna answer that by then. We'll answer whenever we want to, because they were getting 10, 11 offers. Now we can go back to normal. So you can write a contract and say, we want to answer within this deadline. So what generally you should use, if the house is vacant and you show it in the morning and the people, the agent says that people, it takes a little bit to contact them, then 24 hours. If the house is occupied and you show it before noon, you can terminate it if you want to that evening, that night. You got to give them some time, of course. You got to get the contract and all the signatures, but 12 hours is plenty. So let's say you show it at 9, you show a few more houses, you write the contract, you get it to them by 2. I'm terminating or ending that effective date at 10 o'clock the next morning. And I know it sounds a little mean, but listen, they got a sign in the yard. They had to leave the house for me to show it. They obviously want to sell it, right? I got buyers that want to buy it. I write the offer, so give us an answer. And when they call you, when the agent calls you and said, we're going to need more time to make a decision, what does that mean?
Waiting for more.
You're waiting for more offers. I'm always like, look, you can make a decision one way or the other. Now, you don't have to be like that. That's just me. You can be really nice and say, oh, you just take as much time as you need. Paragraph 31, time is of the essence. What does that mean? All those blanks you filled in. And it's really important that your job, part of your job, your responsibility is to make sure that your client gets everything done in a timely manner. You got to be talking to the lender, right? Because sometimes buyers, they send in whatever document the lender needs, and the lender needs 3 more documents, and they don't send them. And that holds up the loan. You can't do that. So you got to be talking to the lender, and the lender goes, hey, you know what? I'm trying to move this as fast as I can, but I need this. So you can talk to the buyer and say, I talked to the lender today. You still need X, Y, and Z. You talk to the lender and say, where's the appraisal? Right? Time is of the essence. Got to get it done. You talk to the inspector and you say, where's the inspection report? I've got to have that because we're running out of time. And so on. I mean, time is of the essence means that you pay attention to those days just as hard as anybody else. And then the buyer signs it and the seller signs it, and you sold it and you made money. And now all you need to do is what?
We getting the next one.
That's exactly right. Remember, you want to be in the bay. You don't want to be out in the ocean in the hurricane, in the bay. Got it? We're done. That was good. Any questions? That's only 8 pages of the contract. There can be a lot more to it. The key is that you get these 8 pages right first.
Thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure. I don't know if I've been to this thing or not. Push that one again. Please.
Thank you so much for the class.